Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with special guest Andrew Hackett, and he's here today to share with us his book, Free from Fear, Understanding Fear's Control Over Your Life and Why Loving It Will Set You Free. Now, doesn't that sound interesting? Now, Andrew has more than 20 years of experience helping people think outside their limitations and move beyond their fears so they can accomplish amazing things in their life, business, and relationships. So let's welcome to the show, Andrew Hackett.
G'day. Great to be here from Australia. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. My goodness, once I picked it up, I could not put it down. It is a game changer.
Thank you. I'm really excited about it, and the feedback I've been getting from it has been really beautiful from people, just the impact that it's having on people's lives.
Well, we know that this book is part of a series, but I have to ask you, what inspired you to write this book?
This book was my first book, so I actually wrote this book a number of years ago, and I suppose it's like with anything. I discovered that, in fact, there were still some fears around me getting my story out there. The sensitivity of the story, the fact that not even my family really fully knew my full story, let alone putting it out to the entire world. So the reason why I wrote the book was I believed that what I have been through in life with the sexual abuse as a teenager and how I have overcome it actually has some real value to other people who are going through something similar, and that they could then perhaps look at as well what I had learned and what I can offer and stuff in the hope that maybe it just helps other people.
Well, that's so brave of you to do, because I know a lot of times, and I know people will stuff that information and it will really impact their lives in a really dramatic way.
Look, absolutely. And for me as well, I lived with my head in a bottle for 20 years trying to deal with the guilt and the shame associated with the sexual abuse. And eventually I got to a point where I needed to sort myself out once and for all. I had two young boys. They were 2.5 or 3 and about 6 months old. And it really started to impact me, seeing their vulnerability, which of course was only, a mirror of my own vulnerability. It was actually, I was seeing myself when I was looking at them. And I just realized that not only did I deserve a better life and I deserved to, be a better person within myself, but they certainly deserved to have a better father and a better opportunity as associated with that relationship. So that really brought me out of my sort of funky situation that I found myself in. And it helped me seek some help and get moving.
Well, you start your book off talking, telling the readers that they are not alone. And it's, I found just the beginning of your book to be so powerful. Why did you feel it was so important to start there?
Because when you go through something like sexual abuse or any real trauma for that matter, the way our mind interprets it and breaks it down is we do feel very alone. We do feel like we are the only one experiencing it, and certainly the only one that is going on. And for me, I lived with that guilt and shame for 20 years because I actually thought for a large part of that time, certainly for 12 to 13 years, I didn't even know that anybody else had ever been affected by the same abuser. So that contributed to that guilt and shame, but it certainly contributed to that feeling of loneliness, that feeling like I'm the only one going through this. And more to the point, if I ever said anything, nobody would ever believe me. And I just want to get the message. It's a real core part of the message that you are not alone. Irrespective of whatever your trauma is, you are not the only person that has ever experienced that. Other people have, and other people have worked through those sorts of things before. And sometimes just reaching out and, accepting the fact that there are other things that have gone on and everything like that can help us. We can start to kind of stand with some sort of solidarity. This is where things like the Me Too movement and everything like that is, in my opinion, is so extraordinary and so important because, the repression of women, for instance, over centuries, women are starting to realise that there's actually real strength in numbers. And not only is there strength in numbers, there's real healing in numbers as well. And that's why that message of you're not alone is so important to me, and I think it's so important to be heard as well.
That is a real, now I can see where that would be a very important message for people to hear that and know that, gosh, there are other people that are experiencing what I'm experiencing, and there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I'm going to be able to get through this.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's important. I think everybody deserves to live a life, free of these restrictive boundaries that our mind creates over a period of time. And because on the other side of it is real beautiful freedom. And when you're there, you just want to share it with the world. You just want the whole world to be able to experience that.
Yeah. So in your book, you talk about how fear is really kind of this big part. It's a big player in everyone's experience. Why is that?
Okay, so there's some interesting things going on there. So first of all, there's our physical structure as a human. Fear is a big player because the way our mind operates, back from our caveman days, it's part of our evolution, is that we are actually designed to see the negative in something 80% of the time. And this is all part of our need for survival in the, living in the jungle with the lions, tigers and bears sort of perspective. The problem is now we're living in a modern society where we're not living amongst lions and tigers and bears. We don't constantly need to be on guard. Yet our mind still operates in this archaic sort of caveman-like way. So we've got that physical sort of and psychological attribution to the way fear plays out. Now, the big problem is, as I talk about, is not so much the lions and tigers and bears in our life. It's not the obvious fears. A lot of people, for instance, in Australia might have a fear of spiders and snakes because we've got some of the most poisonous in the world. But if you actually look at the statistics, spiders and snakes are not the issue in Australia. Things like stress is the issue. Things like the common, what I call the common everyday fears. We wake up in the morning and we fear: are we going to fit in? Are people going to like us? Are we going to be able to get by? Am I going to be able to feed my children? Am I going to be able to keep my job? All of these things play in this very underlying aspect in all of our thoughts, all of our feelings, and all of our choices. And what is ultimately happening is we live in this unconscious sort of space. We live, and what I mean by unconscious, I don't mean unconscious as in out cold. I mean unconscious as in not conscious. And in living in that unconscious space, that's where the ego lives, which is the fear's field shelter. And the job of the ego is to keep us disconnected. So that plays out through this process. So the ego is constantly, it's like the parrot on our shoulder talking trash in our ear. It's constantly talking trash. It's constantly putting us down. It's constantly having us judge others, all this sort of stuff, or having us worrying about all of these underlying fears. Now, the problem is, the real big issue is that it then plays out in so many different ways. And stress, for instance, is just a modern term for this low level of fight or flight state, where adrenaline is still triggered and various other things. Although we're not running away from an attacker per se, what we are is we're constantly on guard. We're constantly in this heightened state of worry and stress and sometimes even despair. And if left unchecked for a number of years, and in fact, most of the people I work with, it's been left unchecked for decades, 20 or 30 years. And it becomes not only the new norm for them and their life experience, but it actually then leads to a whole range of things like depression and anxiety disorders. And it can even lead to a various other neurological or autoimmune conditions or diseases because of this state of oxidative stress that happens in the body. It's a physical thing that is created by the psychological aspects of the way we are thinking and feeling in everyday moments. So I'm trying to, through my books, to try and get this discussion happening, try and bring conscious awareness to that unconscious aspect. Because at that point, when we realize what's going on and we can actually see it for what it is, at that point, that's the exciting time, because then we can start to deal with it.
How important that is. And I love how you explain that in your book, because it really breaks it down and makes it where it just makes sense when you hear this. And a lot of times think, oh, the ego's there, it's beneficial parts there to help us. But there is this real big shadow side to it as well.
Yeah, very much so. And this is part of this awareness aspect. Part of the awareness is to get us to try and see the whole life from a different perspective. I have no desire or demand whatsoever for my truth to become everybody else's truth. All I'm doing is offering a different perspective so that people can find their own truth. And I think in their own truth, they can find their own space, their own purpose, and their own reason for being here, so that they can really strive towards the ultimate goal, which I believe is actually us all being happy. The ego is a very, very interesting beast. And what I'm trying to do is to break everything down and make it as simple as possible, because simple is easy to learn and it's easy to implement. And if we can implement easy, then we can continually repeat it. And at that point, we start creating some very positive behavioral habits that eventually become this unconsciously competent way of living, but in a positive sense, not in the negative sense that we have in fact been created over the decades. And that's why I also like to make things incredibly simple, break them down to their core constructs, which is why I talk about this love and fear dichotomy, this moment of choice that we have in every moment that we experience in life.
So how do you get to the point where you can leave that past behind? Because I think for a lot of people, being able to walk through that has to be a really challenging thing.
Look, absolutely it is. And I say to people all the time, don't be afraid to get some professional help, whether that's through a clinical therapist, psychiatrist or psychologist, whether it's through a lifestyle coach or someone who, has just simply been through it before. Sometimes even just having the ear of a good friend that knows and trusts and loves you, it can be the absolute starting point and a very beneficial one. But going through it feels really difficult. It feels really hard, and that's mostly because of a range of things. One, we feel like we're alone, and we feel like people won't understand and accept us if we share our problems with the world. We also have created a whole range of very unconscious habits around the way we're thinking, the choices that we're making, the feelings that they produce. And to change all of that in itself, I don't say it's hard. In fact, I say it's easy. The hard bit is knowing how to do it. Once you know how to do it, everything is easy. And that's where a good repeatable process comes in. That's where finding someone who not only has been through it, but has unpacked it over 10, 15 years. And through that process has then created an actual repeatable process that everybody can actually do, irrespective of where they're coming from or irrespective of where they're actually going to. And that's really important, I believe, because what it does is by focusing on a process, one, it kind of switches us off from the mind chatter that's going on. It helps us focus on the moment of what we're trying to achieve. And two, it gives us this step by step. So it takes the anxiety of possible failure out of the way. It takes the anxiety of, I don't understand what all the steps are. I say to people all the time, when we walk up a staircase, we don't necessarily need to see all of the steps, do we? All we need to do is know where the next step is in each particular moment. But before we try to tackle something, before we try to deal with these big fears in our life and these big issues in our life, our mind, our ego wants to overcomplicate it, wants to make it complicated, wants us to see what all the steps are before we even take the first one. And I try to just explain to people, this is all successful people do. All they know is that the next step is what's actually important, because when they get to that next step, then they can see the next step again. And by taking it one step at a time, we can in fact move forward in a very, very productive way and take all of that fear out of it, out of the actual process, out of actually moving forward. And I think that's ultimately what's really important.
Well, how wise that is. I'm so glad that you shared that with us. When we talk about awakening, in your book, you share about your awakening. I'd love for you to share with our listeners what that was like.
Yeah. I still remember my awakening and what happened. So I'd been going through a process. I'd come out of my rock bottom, was going through fixing all my issues. I'd realised that my marriage had in fact fallen apart. I had moved on from that, and then eventually I found my new partner, Michelle. And now, the reason why she's an integral part of that story is it's an example of how life can fundamentally change when unconditional love is, at its strongest, is being offered and also received. And what had happened is it had helped me. I was going through what I refer to as the discovery phase. So I'd had developed this awareness that there was more going on around me than I'd ever given credit to. And I'd started exploring all of these new ideas and new theories, new teachings, both with spiritual teachers and coaches and all this sort of stuff, lots and lots of reading. I buried my head in books for years and years, both ancient texts and more modern texts. And it eventually came to a point, and it was almost like there was this massive buildup of pressure happening. And it wasn't a pressure in a stress type of pressure. It was a pressure in almost something magical about to bubble out from inside of me. And for many months by this stage, I'd had a variety of different teachers. I'd had people just showing up to my farm completely unannounced from various parts of Australia to give me messages. It was like the universe was absolutely determined to ensure that I got my message loud and clear. And it needed to tell me dozens of times, over and over and over again, from completely unrelated people. And what that message ultimately was that I'm here to be a teacher. I'm here to be a messenger of sorts. And the reason why I needed to be told so much is because, to be quite honest with you, I just didn't feel worthy of that opportunity. I didn't feel worthy of that role. Anyway, I remember having a discussion with Michelle. I was talking to her while I was driving back from a job. We were on the phone, and I told her about this particular message that I'd gotten. And the message was that I was here to be a teacher. And she just said to me in one beautiful, clear sentence, she said, "Andrew, you've been a teacher for many, many years already. The only difference is you doubt it." And it was such an aha moment, and it created this extraordinarily overflow of emotion. It literally came straight out of the pit of my tummy and just reached out and just burst out and overflowed everywhere. And fortunately, I got home safely, because it also triggered an extraordinary set of visions, which still to this day, to be really quite honest with you, I don't completely understand. And I did get home safely. I then collapsed on the grass outside my farmhouse at the time and lay there for what honestly seemed like, hours and hours and hours. I remember sort of coming to, not in a unconscious to conscious sense, but just realization that it was actually getting dark and quite cold and I needed to go inside. But this vision happened of a ball around me, like I was inside quite a large, almost clear sort of ball, like a sphere. And in that sphere, there was a whole range of puzzle pieces, very small puzzle pieces, all working away feverishly like ants, on an anthill, all doing their own particular role. And it took me many, many days. It was about 4 days that this vision lasted for. And to be quite honest with you, I wasn't very productive over that 4 days. I was kind of immersed and lost in what was going on. And what was actually unraveling was these puzzle pieces were slowly making different puzzles all around me, above me, below me, behind me, in front of me. But what took me a while to realize is that every single puzzle piece was a particular moment in time that I had experienced, or someone who I'd touched or had an experience with had experienced. So it was both my perspective and their perspective. And each puzzle piece represented this. And then slowly these puzzle pieces started to form larger pictures. And those larger pictures were more periods of time as opposed to individual moments. They were periods of time throughout my life. And then eventually those sort of medium-sized puzzles started to join together to form one large puzzle. And what the unbelievable realization, and this is a realization that a lot of people have. It's not what I would classify extraordinary in its own way, but what it was extraordinary to me at the time. It was the realization that every single moment, every thought, every feeling I had ever experienced, and every thought or feeling that I had ever um, extracted out of another or created in another through what I had done, rightly or wrongly, even the bad things that I'd done, every single one of those moments brought me to the here and now. And the picture that all of them ultimately formed was a picture of me in the situation that I was in at that exact point in time. So it's this realization that everything that happens to bring us to the here and now, and why that present moment is so extraordinarily important. And it started a flood. And this is what I talk about my awakening. For some people, it's not necessarily a point in time, and an awakening happens in different ways to different people. I believe they're all as unique as we are. Excuse me. But the big realization was how everything that I had learned, everything I had read, everything had just suddenly appeared to me in a moment to help me understand what this greater picture is, to help me understand what my purpose is and why I'm here, and accept it. Because in that moment of awakening, you experience a love that is so pure and divine, completely unexplainable in a physical world context, because we don't experience pure, divine, unconditional love in this kind of way. You hear of some people who have near-death experiences, or or people who are born again in a Christian or a godly sense, and they've experienced this level of love. I believe all awakenings are the same in one form or another. We just have different contextual overlays. We have different cultural overlays. We have different, perhaps, religious beliefs as well. What I started to realize is that, in fact, we're all believing and speaking the same truth. We're just using different language. We're just using different words. We're just using different experiences to explain it. And it was a beautiful moment for me, this complete singularity and complete lack of separateness that, in fact, we are taught about or expected to actually accept as a reality. It started to make me question even more. And as many questions that were answered, to be quite honest with you, there were a lot more that were yet to be answered as well.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful story. At what point during your journey did you realize that the fear was gone for you?
It was actually some time afterwards, even though that particular moment in itself was the catalyst that removed that fear. It was probably many months later where I started to realize, oh, hold on a second, because people kept saying to me, oh, wow, Andrew, you're doing so well, you look so good. And it's just because the frowning, this constant negative state of mind had just passed, and I had no fear-based experiences anymore. And although I didn't associate it as such, it's just people kept on saying, you are such a different person now. So I then started to slowly examine it and try to understand it and unpack it. And that was really the beginning of me trying to understand the fact that there was, I'd accepted the fact that I had come here to teach, to be a messenger of sorts. What I hadn't fully understood was what that message was. So I needed to unpack it. I needed to explore it. I started doing work with other people in a more formal sense, because I'd been doing work with people for many, many years in my my corporate role that I'd played out. I was a business management consultant for some 20-odd years, and as part of that, I had always been doing work, developing people and helping people and growing people, mentoring and guiding people, and teaching people, as it turns out. It was just always in a very informal setting. So when I started to unpack what was going on, I started to work with people on it and started to slowly develop a process. And then I started to realize that that process was repeatable. And in fact, I then started to realize that everybody I came across irrespective of what state they were in, and irrespective of what journey they still had to undertake, that process was repeatable in everyone, and we could get these amazing results. It took commitment, it took determination, it took focus on behalf of the individual to no longer live in that unconscious slumber, to no longer live in that state of fear. And sometimes it requires a real subtle, gentle approach, which is, what I offer the world in a lot of ways through my daily inspirations and everything that I post on social media and the videos that I do. To try and just subtly change this perspective that we have, so we can start to see that there are different ways of looking at things. Sometimes it needs more direct intervention. It needs a real clear strategic process to try and get them out of where they are in. So it's different for everybody, which is also the reason why I offer different services to everybody. Some people like coaching, some people like to do it on their own space. Some people just want to, digest it over a number of years. They want to take 10 years to figure it out for themselves, and I honour them for that as well. Whereas other people want to get in there and do it a little bit in a more accelerated way, and I honour that too. So it's this realisation came about where, ultimately speaking, I started to see what was happening, and more to the point, started to see that I believe that the world really needs to see all of this, so that nobody's left behind, so that nobody is suffering as a result of their relationship with fear.
So as people are working through fear and working that path, and you have kind of like the roadmap for them in the book, Free from Fear, do you ever get people kind of pushing back going, gosh, you know what, I have to live in a practical world. I can't be super woo-woo. I still have to be able to work on myself and function, but I still have to be in this world too.
Yeah, look, that's actually a fabulous question, Marianne. You're absolutely right, and that was something that slowly developed within me over a period of time as well. So this is why I refer to the need for a holistic approach. Like, we need to change the mindset. Everybody knows the power of mindset coaching and changing our mindset. I say we need to take it one step further, and we need to match what we're doing with the mind with what we're doing with the body, because the body is our physical vessel that carries us through this life. And if we're not looking after the body, it actually reduces our psychological or our mental capability as well. But we also need to embrace the spiritual aspect, the heart-based aspect of it all too, because that's where synchronicities happen. That's where influence and intuition takes a hold. That's where this opportunity that is far beyond our capability suddenly comes into play. And I hear people all the time say that, this spirituality stuff, I'm not too sure about it, which is actually the real reason why I talk about spirituality with practicality. We're physical beings, or more to the point, we are spiritual beings that have come into a physical being existence to experience everything that physicality can give us. We, as our spiritual self, as our formless being, we can't experience fear. We can understand it like a memory, but we can't experience it. We come to Earth, as it turns out, to experience this physicality, and what comes with that is both love and fear. And that contrasting experience that we can undertake is really, really important, because it's like everything. Everything's experienced through these contrasts. You can't experience tall unless you experience short. You can't experience hot unless you experience cold. You can't really experience and fully understand the power of love unless you also experience fear. The challenge, though, is that we've been indoctrinated into a life through education, through cultural beliefs, to believe that a fear-based existence, that depression and anxiety, that all these other sorts of things are in fact what life is all about. In fact, worse still, that is all life has to offer. And I say to people all the time, there is more than enough evidence in every moment of every day that is in fact actually untrue. That life does have so much more to offer, and it's up to the individual to take charge of that experience, because the individual themselves is the only ones who can create their life experience. And so I think that's a very important thing to know and understand, because what it does is it empowers the individual to understand that they need to take control of their life, that they are in fact responsible for the outcome of that experience. And with the right help, with the right guidance, and the right process or the right tools, I say that everything is possible. There are too many examples of people that have changed their stars, moved from poverty to riches, have left a life that was making them unhappy, and broken their life down into something very simple that has brought extraordinary happiness, particularly when it's in the in service to others. That's why I particularly focus my business consulting work, for instance, on working with heart-centered entrepreneurs as well, because I think that's a really important thing to know and understand for a lot of people, because a lot of people haven't experienced this awakening, and they sort of go, well, okay, well, what does this mean? What is the understanding? And I say, well, the awakening has happened for a very good reason. It's to wake you up to that spiritual aspect within you, so that then you can use that in a practical context to help others. And I think that's really the ultimate goal for a lot of us, is to wake up to our true self, to find ourselves and to find the truth within ourselves. And in that, then understand and find what our purpose is, and then turn that purpose into something tangible, something practical, something real. So, because I believe our purpose in the world is always about helping others, whether it's helping others find their purpose, whether it's, just by the simple act of us doing what we're doing, it actually triggers an awakening or a response in others. So then they disappear down their own path to try and find their own meaning and truth in life. These are really important things, I think, that everybody needs to know and understand over time.
Yeah, without a doubt. I know that you have a podcast as well that touches on a lot of these really tough topics, and I'd love for you to share a little bit about that for our listeners.
Yeah, so my podcast show is called Illimitable Living, and to be quite honest with you, recording podcasts and even talking to people like yourself is the real highlight of my week. I love doing the individual work, but my particular journey is actually more about helping people in a broader scale. So it's about me being up on stage with my events, working with groups, or just getting my message out in a broader context. And my Limitable Living show is all about having the discussions that I believe the world needs to start having. And some of those discussions will resonate with you. Some of them, they'll challenge you. And look, that's actually kind of the point. But I try to do it in a very matter-of-fact, down-to-earth way. For season 1, I've had a remarkable co-host, Patricia Morris, and who brings a great feminine aspect to the discussion, which I think is ultimately important. I think the world has had too much of this patriarchal dominance, and I think actually the energy around the world is fundamentally changing to the more, the gentler and the kinder and the more compassionate sort of matriarchal model. Even if in the practical context we're not seeing it all that clearly yet. But ultimately speaking, the podcast is just about trying to expand our perspective, just to try and present new ideas. In fact, not many of them are new. Many of them have in fact been around for millennia. I'm just trying to put my own unique perspective on it, in the hope that people will then listen to it and go, you know what, I hadn't really thought about life that way, or I hadn't thought about this aspect of things. And it then encourages them to go and have a discussion both within themselves, but also a discussion with their loved ones. And in that way, the discussion goes a little broader and broader still. A large part of my message, in the beginning part of my message, and I talk about this in my masterclass and various other things as well, is I believe that the world is caught in this search for meaning crisis. And I believe by bringing conscious awareness to this search for meaning crisis, the fact that we kind of feel a bit lost, we're going about our day-to-day in this unconscious kind of slumber, and it's making us depressed, it's making us anxious. By bringing this awareness to it, which is all my podcast show is trying to do, is to help people understand and see things in a different way, so that they can start making the changes that they need to make in their own time, in their own space, without any pressure from me. I'm not here to hard sell anybody or to shove anything down anybody's throat. I'm just here to have a gentle and loving, compassionate discussion in the hope that then people will start to reach out and say, you know what, Andrew, I really do want to talk to you about this because, you know, that really resonated with me. And at that moment, the possibility for awakening to their own truth really becomes real.
Well, I'm sure it's easier for men to reach out to you and have a discussion with you because, hey, you're a guy, you've gone through this, and you can help them also work through that. I know women probably, in not all sense, but maybe in some, feel a little bit more comfortable talking with women too.
You look, that's an interesting thing. I don't disagree with you. And in fact, for many years, that's exactly the way I thought it. But this very strange thing is women actually make up 87% of my demographic. And most of the women between the age of 35 and 65, most of them are around that middle age of around 50. And I think what it is the reason why women are reaching out is because the relationships that they've had with men throughout nearly all of their lives have been unsupportive, dysfunctional, and certainly not empowering for them as an individual. And in some aspects, and this is some of the feedback that I've had, for some women, they really seek a gentle, compassionate, understanding, non-judgmental male viewpoint because they're just not getting it. The males in their relationships, in their lives, just have never been all that communicative, have never fully done the exploration themselves, haven't delved deep into the psychological aspects of how we operate and how that interacts in a practical context. And they seem to actually really appreciate having someone to talk to and someone to work through things with. I think the other aspect is and this is consistent across my demographic, and again, 87% of my demographic are female. In fact, a very large proportion of, I think it's over 50%, are based in America. Europe, it makes up a very large proportion. In fact, my presence in Australia is less than 10% of the people that I work with and my customers and clients. But particularly with females, there is a very common theme that is coming out. And it all stems back to this thing we call our midlife crisis. Everybody, we develop a set of beliefs over a period of time. Those beliefs come ultimately from our parents, and as we get into our early teens, influences and our peers start to influence our belief system. When we get into our early adult years, it's people we work with and the people we look up to and everything like that, and we start to leave our parental influence behind and we start to create our own belief system. That belief system, often with most adults, then stays stagnant, usually by the choices that we make, the people we settle down with, the families we create. And then we get to that age of about sometimes 40, 45, 50, 55, depending on the individual. It happens at different stages. And the individual starts to realize, and this happens in both men and women, we start to realize the belief system that we created in our early 20s is no longer relevant now. And we give it the term of the midlife crisis because all that is our new expectations of life are no longer meeting our belief system. And so there's this inner conflict that happens and we tend to then react. So men react to their midlife crisis in a very different way to females do. Females often do it in a gentler way, but it's more about self-empowerment. It's more about taking charge. It's more about, for women that have spent their life giving themselves to their family, to their children, to their partner, or in some cases giving their life to their career, they suddenly start to, as they enter this stewardship moment, they start to realize that there is in fact more strength and more benefit to those around them through doing some inner work, through looking within and starting to improve themselves and giving themselves that strength. And they then start to stand in their own power. And we're seeing this all happening all over the world. And the Me Too movement is in fact actually a result of this process that I am seeing happening throughout my entire demographic. But what I believe is happening is a lot of women either don't have the skills or don't have the faith in their own skills. They don't have the courage or the self-belief to take the leap that needs to be taken to stand in their own power, in a lot of cases, create a business that relates to their awakening, this heart-centered entrepreneurship that I think a lot of women are now starting to have a calling for. And for some women, it's not quite to that extent. They come and work with me in that earlier stages where they just need someone to support them, to back them, to show them the way, explain to them what the steps are, and just really be there for them, to give them that strength and that power while they start to believe in themselves again. Because for a lot of women, they haven't believed in themselves for decades, and it takes a process of unpacking that, and it's really, really important. So, to be quite honest with you, I became very surprised about the fact that my demographic of the people that I work with and that connect with my message are strongly female, quite heavily so, and more men are coming out of the woodwork. There's no question about that. Men are having this awakening too, and in a lot of aspects, they want someone who is a lot more spiritual in the practical application of it, because men tend to see themselves more as practical beasts. We like to chop the wood and carry the water, whereas women are more connected, more intuitive, more heartfelt, in my opinion, and certainly more in tune with that spiritual aspect. And in some aspects, they're looking for someone who is a lot more practical to help them understand that intersection between the two and why there is this beautiful sweet spot in the middle there. It's I find it quite fascinating, to be quite honest with you, Marianne, in regards to the way the different sexes play out, the way different people in different aspects from different cultural backgrounds also play out as well. But I believe the core of what is happening with the individual actually is consistently the same. And it's all about a desire to leave behind the nonsense of the life that we've been taught to create, living the life that someone else has said is the life that we should be living, and to start actually living the true self, finding our true selves. I connect with some people, both male and female, who have never, ever experienced any type of unconditional love. And just that experience in itself triggers an awakening of extraordinary proportions and sets them on a path that they just never, ever, ever look back on. It's like this analogy in that movie, The Matrix, the red pill, blue pill. Once you make the choice to awaken and to allow it to unfold and surrender to that moment, you just can't look back anymore, because all you see around you is this unconscious, egoically driven madness that has not only perpetuated in your own life for far too long, but it is absolutely epidemic across everybody you come across. And I believe it's a real issue, and I believe that issue, it's time for that to be resolved. And certainly the way people are approaching my message and connecting with the work that I do, it is absolutely proving that point in my mind.
My goodness, Andrew, we could talk for hours. We're going to have another discussion. I can't wait to do that. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community?
Oh, great question. Thank you for asking. So, look, we're all on Facebook and Instagram. I do a lot of my work through Facebook only because I like the format and the way it works. So if they can, they get onto Facebook and they search Andrew Hackett Australia. They'll see a photo of me there with my book, and they can connect with me and they can message me and everything like that through that page. On Instagram, I am through the name of Andrew S. Hackett on Instagram. And both of those have daily inspirations, videos, a whole range of content and stuff going back many years that people can connect with and share, share it, love it, like it, all the rest of it. I really encourage that. I offer that stuff to the world in those formats because I don't want to leave anybody behind. I know not everybody has the money for a rapid, accelerated growth platform like, a one-on-one coaching. But, I'm getting extraordinary results out of people who are just connecting with those daily inspirations over a period of time as they unpack things themselves. So there's Instagram, there's Facebook. They can get onto YouTube as well. I've got a YouTube channel with a whole range of videos coming out. And you usually try and schedule out, 2 or 3 videos every week just to, again, keep people focusing on the different perspectives that they need to think about. If they want to know more, if they want to get right down into the nitty-gritty of it all, they can go to andrewhackett.com.au. That's andrewhackett.com.au, and they can have a look at my pages there. On there is my masterclass, which is a great accelerated way to get moving for everybody who wants to get started, and that's really at a fabulous low price point. And with my masterclass as well, the premium model actually has a number of calls with me, 4 50-minute calls, so that we can get right down to the nitty-gritty for people. And for a lot of people, that's all they need to get started. And it's priced so beautifully because I don't want to leave anybody behind. I also have a subscription service with my Fitter Freedom Academy, which again is accessible via andrewhackett.com.au, and that's for people who want to do things in a self-paced way, but they need access to all the content. So that's all my podcasts, all my blogs and articles, all my videos, my online education program, you name it, it's in there. People can obviously also go to illimitableliving.com. That'll send you to my podcast on iTunes. It's also available on all the other platforms for podcasts as well, if you just want to listen to some stuff in the background and digest a different way of looking at things as well. But of course, let's not forget about the books. They can connect with me through the books. I love writing my books. I love getting messages and photographs of people that have read my books as well. And they're all available on Amazon, both in Kindle format and also in print format. Free from Fear is available in audiobook. I have not recorded the audiobooks for the Fearless series yet. That is still coming. And it's also available through all other good online bookstores as well. So thank you very much, Marianne. I appreciate you asking for that. I love connecting with people. One other thing. They can email me, of course, andrew@andrewhackett.com.au. I love getting emails from people. And I love certainly helping people, make the changes that they really need to make in their life.
Well, Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you, Marianne. I've really thoroughly enjoyed talking with you. And you're right, we could certainly talk about this for hours and hours and hours. I'm very passionate about what I do.
Well, Andrew, it's been such a pleasure to spend this time with you. You're such an inspiration. And my goodness, loved your book, Free from Fear. Again, if you'd like to connect with Andrew Hackett, you can at his website, andrewhackett.com.au. Free from Fear is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and select indie retailers. If you don't see it on the shelf, ask for them to order it. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary. A recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.